Welcome to Money Conversations with KJ. KJ is a lifelong entrepreneur who's made a lot of money, lost a lot of money, and found his way back again. If you're looking for a sterile how-to, you're in the wrong place. KJ and his guests will walk you through real-life situations told by the people who live them, and they are as messy as they are inspiring. Each episode will offer lessons learned, advice on how to replicate successes and avoid pitfalls, and a new perspective to power your financial literacy. Far from a one-size-fits-all, this podcast can help you build a roadmap to your personal promised land. Milk and honey for some, whiskey and steak for others, and remind you that you're not alone on this journey.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. And I've got a guest today. Been trying to get her on for a few months, but we all, everybody's got schedules, and today it works. So the guest today is Mrs. Kim Cooper. Welcome to the show, Kim.
Thank you.
Today, so Kim's story is going to be real interesting for a lot of you guys. Kim is, I'm going to say, in the middle of raising her family because your kids are teenagers.
Yep, preteen and a teen.
Preteen, teen. So she got a few years ago, but and I've known Kim now, I don't know, 5 years?
At least,
yeah. Right around 5 years. And although, like a lot of my guests, I know some of the story, I don't know all the story. So we're going to get into it. But I think that the story that I know and we'll get into, that the lessons we're going to hopefully teach some people out there as they're listening to this that maybe are in your same, age bracket, or maybe they're earlier, and some of the things that you learned early in life that you're reaping rewards now in, type of thing, right? Mm-hmm. We'll get into that. So she's a wife, she's a mom, she's an attorney. She's really big on education. Her husband was on the show, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, roughly?
I think so.
Yeah, roughly. He's a teacher. So education's real big in the family.
Yes.
And which is great. And fortunately, you afford your kids, good education, not just at school, but at home, right?
Yes.
Where we know a lot of families don't have that, unfortunately.
Well, I think, right, so many families are so busy, right, just trying to do all the things you need to do in your daily life that it can be a challenge to really help focus your kids on the things that they need to do to be academically successful. And for us, grades aren't really the focus. For us, it's understanding, and the only way you know if your kids are understanding the concepts they're being taught is if you stay involved and you constantly ask, and you're there for homework, and you're there and checking in on what are their lessons look like, what have you learned today, what did you like best, what did you like least, all that kind of fun stuff. But it's very time consuming. It is, but
raising kids is definitely time consuming for you out there that have them, and for you that don't have out there, have them. I highly encourage people to have kids. It's an amazing time. I have 4; they're grown and gone. I did my time, so to speak. But what we want to get into is about money and where you guys are today and what you're teaching your kids and how they're receiving it. Because I find that, one, I'll ask you the first question I ask most people, which is your furthest memories back. What were the lessons that mom and dad taught you about money? How old do you think you were when they sat you down and taught you about money?
So my parents got divorced when I was 8.
Okay.
So I was pretty cognizant of not having a lot of money because we went from a 2-income household to a 1 income household, and this is in the early 80s, right? Single mom, right? Kind of a thing, right? And unfortunately, my dad was not consistent on paying child support, so there was. Do
you think that's relatable to a lot of folks out there? I think it really is. A lot of people are not strangers to divorce. We know the divorce record out there is high, and there's a decent amount of. Unfortunately, they named them deadbeat dads, right? They don't pay to help support the kids, and so unfortunately, and you were 8 when that happened, right? You're recognizing there's no money. We need money just for basic, just let's eat and keep a roof over our heads, let alone extracurricular things.
Oh, it was a big deal. My mom was embarrassed having to apply for free and reduced lunch,
right?
But we couldn't do without it, right? there's no way that she would be able to afford packing us lunches every day. So it was I remember distinctly, it was a dime. It was a
dime,
yeah,
right?
It was a dime. Yeah. And I got a card, but I got a card. Here's another thing too, right? I'm hoping maybe we're a bit more sensitive within our educational system now, that you don't have a special card to call you out that you're the kid on the right free and reduced lunch. Yeah.
And again, I think when it comes to money, I talk about that, why people don't talk about money, which is typically they don't talk about money because you don't have it or because you do have it. And it's one or the other that we sit in that whichever bucket, right? I don't have it or I do have it.
Yep.
And you don't talk about it if you don't have it because you're embarrassed. And again, going to the lunch thing. And again, I'm sure there's people out there listening that says, I was in that same boat. I remember, my parents or a single mom, or even there are single dads out there that, had to do that thing. So if you can remember, what was going through your mind at 8 years old when that happened? And just with the lunch thing, and you wanted, because every 8-year-old wants stuff, right?
Yeah.
I want the latest shoes or whatever. What was going through your mind with money at that point? And did mom sit you down and really give you a hard lesson?
No, we didn't. She didn't expressly have a conversation about it. I do remember her applying for the free and reduced lunch, and that I would now have a card. I didn't kind of make that association until she kind of made those connections. So I never thought about it when other kids pulled the card out. So when I pulled the card out, I didn't really think twice of it. It wasn't until a little later that she kind of made a comment in passing that I was like, oh, okay. Maybe this isn't a good thing. I was thinking, woohoo, for hot lunch at school. Right.
Did it motivate you in any fashion of how to treat money? Did you become frugal? Not
at that point. I think it was really because at 8, what money do you really have, right?
Whatever mom and dad give you.
Yeah, which I never got, right? Right. At 8 o'clock, at 8, you're not getting allowance. I don't have allowance. I have birthday money and Christmas money, but I do not have allowance or anything like that, right? So no, what it was, I think it was just over time growing up where we would do back to school shopping, and that was you got that,
right?
And then if you needed something or if you've outgrown something, then that was Christmas,
right?
And then everything else, we had neighbors down the street who had 2 older girls, so I did a lot of hand-me-downs.
Okay.
With hand-me-downs, yeah.
Again, all to me standard stuff. As I have so many conversations with folks, either in your case, you're telling us your story, and there's people out there today that live that exact life, right?
Oh, well, I didn't think anything. I didn't think twice about it when we had our kids. Like when we had our first, it was my sister had her kids first, so she was like, "Oh, here's a bunch of stuff." I was like, "Score!" And then, right, and we would do the same thing, right? We had a network of friends, so. Hand-me-downs? Of course. I would never turn my nose up at hand-me-downs, right? I grew up with them.
So how old do you think you were when you really realized the value of money, trading, like most people trade time for money, and other people trade value for money, but how old, at what age? Because you started learning, I think, when in that situation, mom and dad get divorced and you can see that things are tight in the house.
Right.
Well, how old were you when you started to really think about, wow, I need to probably handle my money more responsibly, not squander money, save money? How old do you think you were when those kind of thoughts came into you?
I don't think it was that focused. I think for me it was, I know that if I want a car, if I want to be able to go to a concert with my friends, if I want to do these things, I have to have a job. So that it wasn't necessarily thinking about the time value of money or, saving. It was just when you don't have a lot, you then become very discerning on where you're going to spend it. Mm-hmm. So I knew that I wanted that. I grew up in Southern California, so having a car meant freedom because there was no public transportation, right? And I knew I wanted a car, so I started saving right away.
Like how old do you think you were? You use a word that I think a lot of people, and try to teach us in the training that is early in life is that we could teach our kids and ourselves about the difference between wants and needs, right?
Yes.
You started with, I wanted a car, right?
Mm-hmm.
But did you need one when you wanted it? Or like, I need a car if I'm going to get a job because I got to get to my job, right? So then that becomes a need versus a want, where there's a lot of kids out there today where parents will afford everything they need.
Right.
Now I want a car, right? And there's a big difference.
Yes, there is. There is. I knew I was going to need a car, right, to get to and from a job, and I knew that I would need a car to go to college and all that kind of fun stuff. So yes, I wanted one though as well, and I knew that I would have to earn it. So I had a job. I had a job at a car dealership at 14.
At 14?
Yeah. So
That was your first job then?
That was my first official
Get a paycheck job.
Versus
versus babysitting and
exactly.
Right.
I licked envelopes for a while. Like there was these side projects, right?
But let's go back there, because if you were doing that at 11, 12, 13 type of years, were you doing it then realizing I'm going to do like envelopes or what have you and get paid $X because you wanted things, you wanted to help around the house, or you just wanted to save the money?
Well, I knew that I knew I wanted a car, so I knew I had to work to save the money
And save it.
Yeah.
So did you become a good saver?
Yeah, pretty good.
Pretty good?
Yeah, I'd say pretty good. Always living kind of paycheck to paycheck. It wasn't as if I was able to save a lot of money and then it went to investments, or it grew exponentially. It was saving for a goal, right? It was always like, oh, I know I need a car, or oh, okay, I have a car. I need to make sure that I can cover all the basic expenses related to it. But then I know I'm going to go to college. I need to start saving some extra money for that. So every time I would save up, it would then be spent once I hit that goal.
Right.
It really wasn't until I got much, much older that we were really able to kind of pivot and start saving kind of for the future, retirement and saving to invest and those kinds of things. And that part of that is because, as you mentioned, our journey was a little different. So I started out in the arts, so I met Shay. I knew I was going to be in the arts. He knew he wanted to be a teacher. So we basically were like, okay, we're going to be poor.
Right. But well, let's go back, because I think the lessons here that I want people to learn about money is, you said a couple of things. Mm-hmm. One, you had a goal, right? And I really believe and understand people who have money have money because they have goals and they work towards them, right, which requires discipline with your money, mm-hmm, right? Because, and I try to teach people there's a huge difference between a goal and a dream.
Yes.
Right? A goal is you actively have a roadmap, so to speak, of what you're going to do, right? You reverse engineer. I'm going to buy I'll just use round numbers. I'm going to buy a $5,000 car. I make $500 a week, and if I'm going to pay cash or I'm going to make enough money for a down payment, right? You got to work this whole equation out.
Yep.
And that's how you did it at that younger age.
Mm-hmm.
So that develops for you over time into young adulthood, and then where you are now. These are habits.
Yeah.
And I think for most people with money, the earlier that we can start with good money habits,
yes,
the more likelihood you won't struggle with money. Mm-hmm. And then it's the opposite. If you don't create good money habits, whether they're spending and saving and investing habits, that's why people will live paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. Because
they don't have clear written goals. They don't have a clear written way of how they're going to get from A to B. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely, I think we were able to kind of survive through some of the tighter times, and recognizing, like I said, I say it glibly, but being a teacher and an artist, definitely we would not be flush with cash all the time. So recognizing that, we lived a structured life with regard to our finances, right? We had a budget. I knew we had X amount of money coming in. I knew we had to save X for all the things in life that pop up that you're never prepared for, right?
I tell people there's things all of us every single month pay for that the previous month, even if you try to budget to the penny, things happen in our lives monthly that we spend money that we didn't know we were going to spend money on, right?
Yes.
You mentioned earlier you went to go get tires put on your car,
Oh,
right?
God.
That's not a monthly thing we do, right? We buy tires every couple of years or so, right? And no one typically saves money just for tires, right? It's just, you got to buy those things, and hopefully you put yourself in a position that doesn't hurt you to just go buy a set of tires. So, but I want to get back to, as you were doing those disciplines, and you had mentioned budgeting, right? And that the early years, because I really believe it's so much can be done in early in life and if we're taught, right? But you're like everybody else that I've talked to, mom and or dad didn't actually sit you down to teach you about money concepts and things to do, budgeting. How old were you when budgeting? And where did you learn it? Was it school? Was it a friend or somebody taught you about budgeting and the importance of it?
Right. So although my mom didn't sit me down and talk about, what did it mean when, now that she and my dad got divorced and how that would impact us financially, she did keep a ledger, right? She was a bookkeeper. And so we had family finances, right? And so, and then I would, as she would bring work home, right? I would see her working on the quote books for her job. So some basic concepts were learned just because I was there around observing, and I wanted to be helpful. So I'm sure I wasn't, but I'm sure it took her twice as long to do whatever she was doing when she was working at home.
Right.
But she would let me run the 10 key. Right.
Okay.
So she would explain to me what she was doing and why she was doing it, and then I would be the one to double check her math, and that gave me an understanding. And now this is the business side, but she kept a similar ledger for home, right? Mm-hmm. So I knew I had a general idea of what the household expenses were as well. But did we ever have a frank sit down and open up the book and talk about it? No.
It's okay. I think 99% of people don't have that type of parent, but I think definitely was to your benefit. Mom was a bookkeeper.
Yeah.
Right. Because I've had a lot of conversations where with people that are around the age of 30, and you look back and you're like, if you really look back, and you are the way you are with money, because even though you're not sat down specifically and taught, we emulate what mom and dad have done.
Yep.
And so I always say, if mom was a spender, you're likely to be a spender. If mom was a saver, you're likely to be a saver.
Yes.
So mom was, in your case, mom was a bookkeeper, and you wanted to be involved with mom and single mom household, that like you inadvertently learned things, not through exact lessons though.
Right.
Big benefit.
Right. And I do think you're kind of spot on with the emulation, and there may have been a silver lining with the divorce for a handful of reasons, but my dad was horrible with money. Horrible. He went through 2 bankruptcies. He was very impulsive with his purchasing. I remember my mom telling a story when they were still living together. He came home with a brand new BMW, drove up in the driveway. My mom was like, "What the hell?"
Right. You went out and just spent $50,000. You didn't talk about it.
Yeah. Right. And then all of a sudden now the household has to absorb that.
Adjust.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Right.
So,
so that taught you a lesson when you saw that.
Yeah.
Again, I just share with people, and it's not your fault. It's not anybody's fault, right? It's not your fault mom or dad didn't sit you down. It's not your fault they treated money the way they did. But as you become a young adult into college years, I believe, where we can really, most of us anyway, understand the right from wrong, right? Started learning the basic needs and wants.
Well, I think that's because most of us, that's the first time we're out on our own, right? Now all of a sudden we've got you've got a handful of expenses you're responsible for and a lump of money, and you got to figure out how to allocate it correctly,
right?
Or you're going to get pink notices and your electricity is going to get shut off.
Exactly. So you learned those lessons fairly early.
Yeah.
And again, normal. This is so, I don't know. Typical. I was going to not use that word, but yes, it is for not just Americans. I got people listening to the podcast all over the world, right? And I think it doesn't matter what currency you're dealing with or what your situation was at home. I think we all have that same commonality of growing up.
Yes.
And why we utilize money the way we do, right? And even though we live in the U.S., the richest country in the world, and we have opportunities galore to us. Right. At what point in time, I know a lot of people listen, and I listen to Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman, right? They're probably the most popular names out there when people want to start learning things about money. Okay. And they're very adverse to, say, like credit cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how old were you when you were introduced to the credit card world? How did you receive it?
Right, right. Well, we had this conversation at dinner the other night, right?
Uh-huh.
It was my grandma, right? And she was forward thinking about, right, recognizing that I'm going to be out on my own and I need to build credit. How do you build credit when you're really young? So this was, I was not quite 18, so I was still I was living with my grandmother at the time. Mervyn's was around. Anybody who grew up in Southern California may and be of my age may remember Mervyn's. But her thought was you need to get a store credit card so that you can buy a few things here and there, pay it off, and start building up your credit.
Right.
So that's what I did. And she didn't really explain it to me other than say that, right, in order to become independent and be able to kind of move forward as an adult, right, that I need to have good credit. And she just said, this is how you're going to build it. You have a job now, right? So buy one thing a month that you can afford and then pay it off before the due date. And that will build good credit. We didn't go into anything greater than that. That was just wisdom.
I think also that's the basic 101 lesson from mom and dad to their kids about credit cards, right? Because we, as an adult, we understand how important credit is. Everybody wants to buy a house at someday, right, or a car, right, mm-hmm, or just any big ticket item. Right. You could want to go buy furniture, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to own a house, Steph. So there's a lot of reasons in today's world, even so, just your insurance rates are affected by good or bad credit, right? Mm-hmm. And so those are the lessons. So when at that age, when she taught you that, did you think about there's got to be more to than just that? Maybe I should dig in.
Nope.
No.
Not even then. No.
Not even then.
Nope.
How old do you think you were when you kind of figured out really how the credit and credit card game works?
That was college. That was when I was fully out on my own and responsible for paying all my bills. And all of a sudden, when you're in college, you get flooded with credit card applications.
Right.
So I shouldn't say that it wasn't that I was completely naive about credit cards, right? I mean, I'd already, whether it was through my mom or grandma or just general conversations, right, you have, right, with regard to paying your bills, mm-hmm, right? It was explained to me how credit works, right? And if you don't pay your credit cards off, that you have a balance, then you're going to get charged whatever that interest rate is. And so I understood all of that, and I don't remember at what point in time.
Was it like a school class did
no,
it,
no,
or friends or family?
No, it would have just been, it's just being around my mom and grandma, and right, and having to pay bills and understand, like, mm-hmm, so that was all shared to me. I don't think it wasn't a sit down, have a long conversation. It was one of those, my mom's sitting at the table paying bills and I'm like, what's this? Or, that kind of thing where you just get bits and pieces over the course of living at home.
Do you think, 2020 hindsight, looking back, had you had a good, comfortable sit down conversation about money and credit cards and investing before the age of, say, 18, do you think your life would be different today?
Possibly. It's really hard to, it's hard to know. You do make a lot of choices, right? Like, as I mentioned, right, I always, partly because of how I grew up, right, I always saved because you never knew what was going to happen. But I never made a whole lot of money to do anything other than that. Yet at the same time, as I did move forward in my career when I was in the arts, I did have opportunities where we had a bit more. And I think I had perhaps more conversations about compound interest, mm-hmm, right? And how that can help you grow your wealth over time. That instead of, let's say, moving to an apartment in a nicer area of town or getting a slightly bigger apartment, now that I've got a bit more, I get $1 raise, right?
Right.
I mean, that kind of thing.
Right.
I may have then shifted that thought process and said, oh, look, all our needs are being met, right? Oh, I wonder if this would be a good opportunity then to take that $1 and save it so that I had a large enough money to then put into a larger, an account that would all of a sudden give me a return on my investment, and look at it that way, which never crossed my mind when I was younger.
Right.
That part never did.
Yeah. So this is why I love teaching the subject, and I named the podcast and everything, my program, everything's named Money Conversations with KJ. I really believe, and we'll get in this with you in a minute, that the more we can all talk about money and have money conversations to help elevate everybody, right? So my next question is, did you ever have any type of mentor as you were growing up?
With regard to money?
Well, not just money, just in life, right? Because a mentor can help people in many different levels, and not just money, but your career, family. I mean, lots of different things mentors are good for.
Even to this day, I think with regard to money specifically, because we don't talk about it. And within my current profession, still is not a lot of conversations with your colleagues. I mean, firms have a vested interest in you not telling everybody what you make, because they don't want everyone to compare. But along those same lines, for example, within the law, right? If you work at a traditional law firm, you generally your goal is to become partner. Well, you're becoming a partner why are they called a partner? Because they used to be partnerships.
Right.
Now they may be professional corporations, but nonetheless, there's a buy-in, right? Mm-hmm. You whether it's a partnership or you're going to be a shareholder in a professional corporation, there's a chunk of change. And when I started at my current firm, I remember one of the first questions I asked was, so what's the buy-in for a partner?
Right.
And the two other partners I was talking to, they kind of looked at each other and they looked at me and they're like, oh, I don't know what that is right now.
Oh.
You're like the first person who's like directly asked. And so I was like, oh, okay. So even here, that isn't openly discussed or.
Well, and why do you think that was? I mean, I think it makes people uncomfortable sometimes, right? Yeah. Dollar amounts. Very much so. And again, because I say if people who have money don't want to talk about it, because if you let somebody know you have, say a substantial amount of money, you're afraid one of two things is going to happen. They're like, can I borrow some? Right. Can you invest in me? Right. They're trying to get some of what you have. Right. And that's why they don't like to talk about it, the people with money, versus the other side of the coin is I don't have any, I'm embarrassed. I'm age X and I should have more than I have. I haven't done well with my money. Does that reflect on how I do everything else in my life?
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Which it can.
Yeah.
It can. Yeah. Right. I love the saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. Mm-hmm. I love that saying because I really find it to kind of be true. So as you were going through there and no one actually sat you down and you're learning all these lessons through life. Mm-hmm. And so you did or didn't have a mentor?
I mean, there have always been people that I've.
Are you a very inquisitive person? You ask a lot of questions.
I just do. Yes.
Right.
Yes, I do. So, when I met you, I was just chocked full of lots, and I still am. I still ask you lots of questions, right? Right. Yes. So I don't have one particular person. It's just as I meet people, I will just ask them. But kind of circling back to talking about money. So a girlfriend of mine, we're very, very close. I went through a lot of personal things with her, and so we've shared very, very intimate details, right? She shared with me very intimate details of her personal life and things like that. So you think really good bond. And yet when she reached $1 million in her, in her retirement investments, mm-hmm. she was very excited and she shared with me, but she prefaced it with, I'm excited to share this, but I don't want to brag. And Right. And I know this, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I'm so proud of, what I've done.
Hitting the mark, right?
Yes. And I think that's another thing to consider as well. Like, even if you do have money, not necessarily, I guess because as a society, we don't talk about it. Maybe there is something kind of.
There's a stigma.
Yeah, it's gauche, right? Yes. Whatever that term is, right? To talk about, you don't talk about money. But that was a huge milestone. She's a single parent too. Right. I got to get her on your podcast. She honed in on this whole compound interest saving early thing early on. I mean, she started before she was 18.
Oh.
And she set her $1 million goal when she was, I think, 18 or 20.
Right.
And that's so.
That's why she reached it, though.
Yeah,
right?
she did reach it, and she was proud of herself, and she should have been, and she should have been able to celebrate without, I think, prefacing this whole, I don't mean to brag, or I don't mean to, Right.
Well, with this person, it sounds like you've been friends a while, had you and shared a lot of intimate things, had you really got deep with money type of conversations with her, or was that kind of just surface level stuff?
Well, I think so. We talked about how much things cost, and I was like, we were in the market for a car, and she was like, oh, well, because I never buy a new car. I said, I don't buy new cars either. Right. and we talked that kind of way, but not necessarily. She's like,
hey, I'm having real success with this investment,
right?
Type of thing, or right. I did this thing. None of those types.
No,
and as close as you were or are,
yeah,
right.
Yeah,
That's my point with all you listeners out there. Man, please, please, please have these conversations, because how long have you known this lady?
Oh my gosh.
20 plus years?
Yeah.
So if she would have shared with you some of the things that she put in play, and you would have said you'd had maybe an aha moment of some sort, it's like, I'm going to do that too.
Right.
Right.
Oh,
and now you guys grow this journey together, and she comes to you, she hit her milestone of the $1 million, and you're like, I'm right behind you. I'm at 880.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All because of a conversation you had 20 years prior, not about prying about, oh, I'm able to save more than you, or I make more than you. No braggadocious type of things.
Right.
Just good, hard money lessons that can help. And so for you guys listening, if you're in those positions, and you're doing well with money, things are starting to really take effect, because compound interest is the rewards are at the end, the last 10 years, right? Yes. The first 20 years, it's slow going, and you have to be patient, and you just have to understand how it works, and that it'll be in your benefit down the road, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're in that position, man, have those conversations, because that could have totally changed the course of your life financially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great lesson right there in itself. So, and you would have thought of her as, and again, I always bring up having mentors, because it's just another form of learning through life experiences. Yes. And I think just as you watched mom and dad, right, that you learn those lessons, we all do. Right. That, get that back up. Learning those lessons is how we start to make a right or left as we're going down life's lane.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Am I going forward, right, or left? What are we doing? What are my decisions? It's based on what we've seen.
Yes.
And or, unfortunately, the ones that we learn through experience cost a lot.
It kind of goes back to, with regard to kids, right? You kind of want them to try and learn those lessons on their own, like succeed and fail when they're younger, and the damage is limited, right? Because as you mentioned, as you move forward in life, the stakes kind of get higher.
Yes.
So it would be good to kind of set them up and let them try and fail. So I have the luxury now of giving my kids an allowance, and I suggest to them that they save some, and then if there's something that they want, that they can take a small portion of their allowance and save towards whatever it is they want. And my daughter is super frugal, and if I say something like, oh, well, sure, you can get that if you want to spend your money, and she'll look at me dead in the eye, and she's like, no, I don't want to spend my money, Mom. Yeah,
you buy it for me.
Exactly.
Mom, will you get me that?
and then I'm like, no, that's not within our budget. Right. And then I said, but you can buy it if you like. And her response is always no. Right. She's tight-fisted, that one. But my son, he's much more impulsive. And so he's good at saving. He has actually quite a chunk of money saved, but he'll take more than I usually recommend when he wants to go hang with his friends. And when he comes back, it is all gone.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a boy thing or a girl thing. I don't know. It isn't. I've talked to both sides. So earlier when you mentioned about goals, when did goals and goal setting become important to you? How old do you think you were? Because, again, back to the importance of how important they are. Mm-hmm. And I know that you had that career shift, right, from the arts to, hey, I'm going to go to school and, study law and get a degree. What was it, money that made that decision, or was it you faded out of wanting to do the arts? I mean, because a lot of people, and roughly how old were you when that happened? Because there's people out there that change careers all the time.
Right.
And for multiple reasons. I think most of the reasons have to do with money. When you are without for so long, you're like, I'm tired of living paycheck to paycheck or just above. Right. So did that factor in?
Not for me. What I found for me, it was a personal choice. I was working for Cirque du Soleil, and I loved my job. I loved everyone I worked with. I loved what I did. I was beginning to see the people around me who were a little older, right? So I was in my 30s and they were in their 40s, and some of them were having surgery, shoulder surgery, knee surgery. And I'm like, oh my, that doesn't seem very old to be having surgery. And that the surgeries were caused, right, because of the work. Right. And so it was really kind of like, okay, well then where am I going to go next in my career? It was a kind of a career goal situation. And well, I can go into management, right? Because that's kind of the next is you just automatically, right, kind of move into a leadership position. And I saw that the things that I loved about what I was doing was working with my hands, was doing all the artistic things. And that if I went into management, I wouldn't be doing that as much or at all. I would really be dealing with numbers and people. And although I could, deal with the people part, but, crunching out the numbers on all the budgets and then, dealing with all the HR issues, I was like, put those together and then not doing anything artistic, not so much for me. So then I just pivoted and said, okay, well, what else did I enjoy when I was in college? What else did I seem to do well at? And I just happened to take a law class when I was an undergrad. When I was at USC, it was great. They actually had a law professor from the law school teach this juvenile justice class, and it was wonderful. And I really enjoyed it. So when I thought back about what would I like to do, that was a possibility. And sometimes life is serendipitous. I had just read an article in the newspaper about an open house they were having for the law school. They just recently opened a law school and they had a nighttime program. So I was like, oh, well, I took this class and I liked it. Oh, and now there's a law school where they have a part-time program so I could still work and go to school. Oh, well, maybe I'll take a look at that. And that's kind of how all that unfolded.
Yeah, but that's a huge commitment / sacrifice when you did that, knowing that you had to work during the day and then schooling at night, right?
Yeah.
Took away almost any time for what people want, FUN, right? Everybody wants, what can I do to go entertain myself type of thing. But at what point did that decision making come, when you made that decision, I want to roll into retirement, at what age did you really start thinking about retirement and the things that you needed to do to reach, AKA some sort of retirement, and making those decisions had to do with retirement?
So for me, what was nice is once we kind of made this transition down to Vegas, and I was working in shows that were what are called resident shows. They were in one place; they weren't tours. That's all of a sudden when I was working within companies that had 401ks, and you could start thinking about retiring where they had a program already set up where the onus wasn't on you, right? So this is something else I think for people that can be daunting is if you don't work for a company, right? Either you're an independent contractor or right, you work for a company that doesn't have an existing 401k structure. Where do you go? Who do you reach out to? How do you invest? Like in what vehicle and how often? And there's just so many steps.
How old were you think when this was going through your mind?
So I think so I always worked through college, so I knew that 401ks existed. I just
everybody's heard of them.
Right. And I did have one of the Julie, she's still a friend today. She was the person who hired me at one of my many jobs in college. And one of the first things she said was, well, I would love to have you stay, come, work part-time, but you wouldn't qualify for the 401k. And I'm like, okay, well, how does that work anyway? Right.
So you got educated.
So then, she explained it to me and I thought, oh, this is a fabulous thing. And then, so any other time I had picked up jobs along my career path, right, I would ask, but because I was in the arts, very
few had them.
Yeah, they didn't.
It's usually some big corporations. You got to afford to, offer them, which means they have to make a lot of money. So again, back to the rough age, because I find that people under the age of 30 just have a mindset of that's far away. I don't want to worry about that right now. But then when you truly understand compound interest, you
yes.
should be like, I should have thought of that when I was 18, like your friend did.
Yes.
And reached, a milestone of $1 million. And how old was she when she ran numbers? What do you think how old was she?
No, she's 55.
At 55, right? So she started early, and at 55, $1 million, right? I did a podcast with another friend of mine who retired at 55, and he's had that podcast had so many views to it because everybody wants to know, how the heck do I retire at 55? What's a secret, right? Yeah. And there are many ways to get there. His was because he worked for a big Fortune 500 company, UPS, and did his 30 years and has a pension and all of this. Yeah. Your friend...
It's like the military.
Right, exactly. And your friend goes, you know what? I'm going to start putting money to work at 18.
Yes.
And boom, right? And so I'm getting ready to do another video that talks and explains to people about the difference between having a 401k or a Roth IRA, traditional IRA, or even a Roth 401k, right? And these are things like you were at the early age, like how did those work? And finally someone sat you down and explained it.
Just the 401k, right? I think that this video, right, the subject matter of your video would be very, very helpful, especially for everyone like me for so many years who never worked for a company large enough to offer a 401k. And anytime I kind of heard about potentially investing, I just didn't know. And the beauty of the internet now, right? I mean, this is all pre.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You and I didn't have that luxury, back then, where it was at our fingertips, right?
Yes.
And because money has always been a little bit of a taboo conversation, right? Everybody holds it as close to their sleeve. You're afraid to talk about it, right? Yeah. And again, this is why I just became passionate a few years ago. Like, I just wanted to let's just talk about it and learn all these, and I teach financial literacy at its simplest form. But even at its simplest form for a lot of folks may seem complicated.
Yes.
And that's why when they try to talk to a financial advisor and the financial advisor starts using jargon that just goes, it's a whole language. It might as well be Chinese or something, right? Yep. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so then and if you don't understand or know anything, what do? You ignore it. You're like, I don't know what that is. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing.
Right.
Kind of a thing.
Right. Well, and it could be just so overwhelming. Right. Just so overwhelming. And you've got so much else going on in your life, right? You have the myriad of things that pull at your attention.
Right.
You've got just a finite amount of time to deal and attention span and energy. Yes, it can be very, very challenging. I think the earlier you can begin to learn those concepts and kind of just internalize them, then as you move forward in life, some of the stuff will just make sense and it'll be easier for you to make decisions.
And I've talked about that when I have a guest on here and I ask the question when they're between the ages of plus or minus 30 years old, is that I find that's the age when people reflect, right when you're around 30 and you look back and now you've been working 10 whatever years, right? And you're like, man, I've been working 10 years. I don't have no money and I've made decent money and I got a couple of things, but there's got to be something better than this, right? What am I doing wrong? Right. And then they want to start to educate themselves at that point. But again, back to understanding the value of time with compound interest, like 10 years literally at the other end of the spectrum could have just cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah. Literally.
No. I look, I printed out the interest rate to demonstrate to the kids compound interest, right? Because when I had my own firm, I had an opportunity to be able to kind of hire them to do all the pictures on my website. And so I paid them, but then I didn't, pay them. I stuck it into a fund. And so to show them like, okay, it's not a huge amount of money. You guys, you each have $5,000, but like, look, here's where I put it in. And let's just assume 8%. Now, how many years has this been? Where are you now? Now look where this money's going to be when you hit 50, right? And they're like, holy cow. I'm like, exactly. That's why I'm suggesting.
Yeah, exactly. When people realize when you just let compound interest work in your favor, money's working. Is like Warren Buffett says, until we start learning how to make money while we sleep, we will work until we die. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so the only way you're going to make money while you sleep is because it's working. You've invested it. It's somewhere. It's compounding every single day and year to your benefit. Right. Yes. And again, front end, very light. Yes. The benefit happens in the last 5 to 7 years. Right. So you have been teaching your kids then?
Trying.
Are you being like you had mentioned your mom was a little vague on some teachings. It was more visually watching and then helping her with, the bookkeeping and stuff. Right. Are you being because of that, are you being more in depth with the teachings? And then Shay's a teacher.
Yeah, I know, but he doesn't teach, right? And right, that's true. He just started teaching econ, right? So, yeah, I guess that's a. But econ and finance aren't necessarily hand in hand, right? They are a little different. So
They are,
right, but yes, are we trying to be more mindful? Yes. Are we doing a really good job? No, and I'll tell you one reason why I think we could do better, or why I think we might have issues, is that we were talking the other night. They're apps, so now everything goes into the app. I'm not having to sit at the table and like do stuff.
Right.
So it's not like, oh, hey, kids, let's have a conversation about why I hate summer here, because all of a sudden our AC bill is like, $400. And this is why I constantly am changing the temperature on you. And you're like, it's too hot. And I'm like, too bad, suffer.
Right.
But it's all on an app. So Shay and I have access to the app, and I'm like, oh, okay. But the kids never see it. It's like this magic stuff now that happens behind the scenes.
Yeah. And it's not magic, right?
No,
it's
no.
work. It's work. And,
right.
and again, I think the kids have a huge advantage compared to our generation that, to have these apps, and the majority of them are free or have free versions, basic versions, like, mint.com, which is probably one of the more popular ones out there, has its free version, which is a good version, and then the paid version, depending. The paid version, when you're making more money and you have a lot more expenses, you really need to do a lot more tight tracking, I think. But your standard mint free is great for anybody under 25, just making whatever, $15 an hour, and has a couple of bills or whatever, right? Yeah. Learning how to track what you're doing and realizing just by opening up that app and knowing, holy mackerel, I spent that much money last month on lunch.
Right.
I didn't realize.
Yeah. Well,
I need to slow down.
Exactly. Well, and it helps. You can set goals, right? So
yes.
when we're going back to goal setting, right? So you can set multiple goals, right? It can be retirement. It can be a car, right? And then it helps you. So I think saving can be challenging. And the one thing that I remember, right, and when I was saving for a car, when I've had to save for anything, it's the question's always been, right, oh yeah, I could buy this X thing or go to this concert or see this movie with friends,
right?
But is it worth giving up getting closer to having a car? And what does that mean to me?
Right.
So that was mobility, freedom, right? All the things that every teenager wants. In addition, right, then I was getting to work in all manner of ways. And so there was also the ability to easily get to and from on my own schedule. Mm-hmm. So it was a question, right? Is this movie with friends, which has an immediate payoff? I mean, there's we should
enjoy life for sure. Let's enjoy life.
Right. But what are they seeing? What are they doing? Is that worth staying, at that point, whatever, $10 away from my goal?
Right.
Because I have to, right? I'm in high school making whatever,
right,
$5 an hour, maybe at that point in time. So here's something else that I just remembered. Anytime I looked at what it would cost to do something or buy something, I would in my head automatically calculate how many hours of work it would take me to pay for it.
See, that's getting really analytical, right? And so a lot of folks, I find, here's what I think part of the issue is. So like, all right, I need to save. The problem with saving, I think for most is, and again, back to Warren Buffett lessons, is really learn how to pay yourself first. Mm-hmm. Because if you pay yourself first, which is a form of saving, right? And you're trying to reach whatever 1, 2, 5, however many goals you have, right? That if you do that first and then the rest of the paychecks to whatever, pay your bills and you have your entertainment money and all of that, then you can have have your pie and eat it too kind of a thing, right? But when people pay all of your bills first and see what's left over to save, that's where the problem comes in. And so as I try to teach people, my goal lesson videos are learn how do you pay yourself first. You're going to be able to reach these goals like 10 times faster and have clear written goals, because Harvard did a study that proves people who have clear written goals will earn 10 times more money in their lifetime and achieve their goals a lot faster. Right. And when you check off a goal, it's like you don't stop having goals.
Nope.
You get more, and typically they get bigger, right? Mm-hmm. Larger amounts of money type of goals. And so would you agree that if you save that way, do you save that way today, or do you save, I make $X, my expenses are $X, here's what's left, so let's save whatever percentage of that?
So luckily, once I shifted and kind of went into the legal world, my financial outlook was a
Changed.
bit better, right?
Yeah.
So that knowing that I didn't have those previous years of being able to save, the very first thing I would do is max out my 401k investment.
Mm-hmm.
Very first thing. And then whatever else was left over, that's how then I adjusted my lifestyle, right? So yes, saving first, only because, right, I recognize that all those years in the arts, I was at a huge deficit and I needed to get caught up. As we know, I'm never going to really get caught up and can't recapture that lost time.
Mm-hmm.
But that was how I kind of dealt with it, was I maxed all of that out first.
So two things, catching up. It's a very loose phrase, especially when I think it comes to money, when you're saving for whatever, and or retirement, because, retirement is everybody's personal definition is a little bit different, right? I really highly encourage people, instead of trying to, in your mindset, saying, I'm going to retire, and what does that really mean, mm-hmm. versus I want to get to be financially independent, right. First. And I think and I think society, whether you want to call it the government or whoever, has always taught retirement, because I asked the question, I've been out on the streets and I ask questions, and one of them is, hey, what age is retirement? Mm-hmm. And what do you think the answer is for most people?
Whatever the age you get Social Security would be my guess. 65,
right? And so if you believe that, if you're trained to believe retirement is an age, mm-hmm. then you're going to believe that I have to work until at least then.
Right.
When we know that's not the reality. Right, because and then I'll use someone like a Mark Zuckerberg as an example. So here's a genius type kid who developed something that turned him into a billionaire before the age of 30. So could he have technically retired? Sure, he could have, but he's too young to. He wanted to follow his passion. It wasn't about money.
Well, and a lot of people find that their job or doing something gives them purpose.
Right.
So if
retirement seems final.
Yes,
like I finished.
Yeah,
I retired. I finished something.
Yeah. Well, my uncle's quote retired 3 times.
Right. And people will tell me that, right? I had my sister 10 years ago who lived in Pahrump on basically almost nothing, and she would call herself, well, I'm retired. I said, you're not retired, you're unemployed. All right? So there's a big difference between saying I'm retired and I'm unemployed.
Right.
Because you could be unemployed with a few dollars and just figure I'm retired. No. And that's why I don't like that term. I'd rather say, are you financially independent? Mm-hmm. Which means, is your money making enough money to support the lifestyle that you want?
Right.
And then you used that term a minute ago. So I adjusted my lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think this is where people can have a roadmap, so to speak, of the direction they want to go. And I think it's just human nature, though, that when you make more money, you want nicer things in life or out of life, right? Sure. Whether it be nicer homes, nicer cars, nicer vacations, the big ticket items.
I don't want to live on the street where Shay and I saw someone get shanked.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, an adjustment in lifestyle to move out of, a not good area, obviously is going to be a priority on the list. But a lot of folks are out there. We've seen this happen with, I would say, athletes, entertainers who make a lot of money in a short span, 5, 6, 8 years. And then after that, the money's not coming in. They spend all that money, literally millions of dollars.
Yes.
And then they're broke again, right? Because they didn't have a plan. And then you get predator money people that come in and, take advantage and take money. So I think that if we can talk to our kids, mm-hmm. the earlier the better. And through conversation, I know that kids are watching us closely at around 7 years old.
Oh, okay.
And because I've had these conversations, and when I say closely, like, is your mom a spender or a saver? And you can tell which one they are. And that's why that's who they become. That's how people will become that way. You're either a saver or a spender. And in your case, right, single mom at 8, she obviously wasn't a spender because she didn't have it. That's why you didn't become a spender. Now, had your mom been in the position of whatever career she had, made a lot of money, mm-hmm. and was always just buying stuff, you probably would have been a spender.
May have, right? If there wasn't a conversation of, well, this is still within our budget.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then watching the other side of the spectrum of dad.
Yeah.
Doing the opposite, like I make a dime, I'm spending 12 cents.
Yeah,
right. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that way. So I think today's lessons, guys, are going to be about learn as much as you can, as early as you can. Have money conversations. My biggest push. I don't care if you're 7, 12, 22, 42, or 52. Start talking. You didn't have a mentor, but can you see yourself maybe mentoring someone in a money conversation that would help benefit them?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I should, right? Definitely
I
should.
think that was. Kim, thanks for coming out. This
Yeah,
has
my
been
pleasure.
really enlightening. I think for a lot of folks out there who have kids and have went maybe changed a career path, you might have had a little mindset shift with some people out there.
We can all do it. We can all do it.
We can all do it.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, do me a favor. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit the share button. We try to put these out as often as we can, usually every couple of weeks. And then if you're on the podcast service, just subscribe. And I have podcasts coming out on a regular basis. So until then, we'll see you on the next one. Hey, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Really enjoyed making all these episodes for you. Remember, we're just having conversations with people's journey with money and the things they did right with it, the things that did wrong with it, and how did they really come about getting their mindset with money. So every episode's different. We all have a good takeaway from them. So do me a favor. Hit the like button, smash the like button, and subscribe to my channel because every episode that I do is going to be different as all our journeys are different. So you guys take care, and we'll talk to you next week.